My name is Anita, and for as long as I can remember, I have been nothing more than a shadow in my own home. My father passed away when I was just 10, and shortly after my mother remarried. That was when everything changed. My stepmother, Mrs. Clara, never treated me as her own. To her, I was just an unfortunate burden, someone she had to tolerate because of my father's will. But my stepsister Nancy? Oh, she was the golden child. Beautiful, intelligent, and, according to Mrs. Clara, the only one in our family worthy of anything good. Every weekend they would dress in their finest clothes, spritz expensive perfume, and head out for lavish dinners, spa days, or trips to amusement parks. I was never invited. I would watch from the window as their car disappeared down the street, leaving me behind with nothing but silence and a cold, empty house. You wouldn't enjoy it, Anita. It's for sophisticated people, my stepmother would say with a condescending smirk. Besides, you wouldn't understand the conversations. It's not for slow people like you. Slow. That's what they called me. Just because I wasn't as quick-witted as Nancy, because I didn't always have the perfect response, because I preferred to read in quiet corners rather than entertain guests at dinner parties. In their eyes, intelligence meant being able to charm people, to flaunt knowledge, to shine in a crowd. I never fit into that mold. Whenever Nancy came back from their outings, she would brag about the wonderful time she had. Oh, Anita, you should have seen the hotel we dined at. The chandeliers sparkled like diamonds. And the food, oh, you wouldn't understand how exquisite it was. Then she would laugh, flipping her silky hair over her shoulder, as if I were a clueless child who couldn't possibly grasp the luxury they enjoyed. At night, I would sit in my small room, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I wasn't good enough. Was I really that dull? That unworthy? But deep down, I knew I was more than what they believed. I knew there was something in me that they refused to see. One evening, as they prepared for yet another grand outing, I gathered the courage to ask, "Can I come this time?" Mrs. Clara barely looked up from adjusting her earrings. "Oh, Anita, don't be ridiculous. This event is for people of a certain caliber. It's best you stay here." Nancy giggled. "Maybe next time if you magically become interesting overnight." They walked out, leaving their perfume lingering in the air. I sat on the couch, staring at the door they had just closed behind them, my heart heavy with rejection. But that night something inside me changed. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore. I wasn't going to accept being left behind forever. One day I would prove them wrong. And that day would come sooner than anyone expected. One fateful Monday morning, our school principal made an announcement that sent a wave of excitement through the students. A prestigious national scholarship competition was being held, and the winner would receive a full scholarship to study abroad. It was an opportunity that could change someone's life forever. The moment I heard it, something inside me lit up. I knew I had to try. But before I could even let the thought settle, Nancy turned to me with a smirk. "Don't even think about it," she scoffed. "This is for the brightest students. Competing against the best in the country? You wouldn't stand a chance." Mrs. Clara chimed in later that evening, as Nancy excitedly shared her plans to enter the competition. "Nancy is already preparing for it," she said with a proud smile. "She's our best chance. Anita, you should focus on more practical things." I clenched my fists beneath the dining table. They didn't even consider the possibility that I could do it. I wasn't even worth a second thought. But I didn't argue. I had long learned that arguing with them was pointless. Instead, I made a silent decision. I would enter the competition. And I would give it everything I had. That night, as the house fell silent and Nancy slept soundly in her grand, neatly decorated room, I sat in my small, dimly lit space with a stack of books in front of me. I flipped through the pages, absorbing every word, pushing myself harder than I ever had before. Night after night, while they went out to their fancy dinners and weekend getaways, I stayed behind, studying. No one noticed. No one cared. But that was fine. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing this for me. Days turned into weeks. The competition drew closer and the pressure increased. Nancy had tutors, study groups, and teachers guiding her every step of the way. I had nothing but my determination. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering in my ear that maybe they were right, maybe I wasn't good enough. But I silenced those thoughts with every page I read, every problem I solved, every hour I sacrificed. The night before the competition, Nancy waltzed into my room, arms crossed. "You're really going through with this, huh?" she said, amusement in her voice. You must enjoy embarrassing yourself. I looked up at her and for the first time I didn't feel small. I didn't feel the sting of her words. Instead I felt something else. Power. We'll see, I replied simply. The day of the competition arrived. The examination hall was filled with some of the brightest students I had ever seen. The air buzzed with tension and anticipation. Nancy walked in with her usual confidence, her head held high, her designer bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't even glance my way. The first round was a written test, a grueling set of questions designed to challenge our knowledge, problem-solving skills, and critical thinking. As I sat there, pen in hand, I took a deep breath and focused. I had worked too hard to let fear take over now. Question after question, I poured everything I had into my answers, my mind sharp, my heart steady. Time slipped away and before I knew it, the test was over. The results would be announced soon and the top scorers would move on to the next round. My hands were clammy as we waited in the auditorium, my heart pounding with every name that was called. Nancy Williams, 89%. I saw her sit up straighter, a satisfied smile on her face. But then the next name made the entire hall go silent. Anita Williams, 97%. A wave of murmurs spread through the room. I felt all eyes turn to me, some in shock, some in admiration. Nancy's smile vanished, replaced with disbelief. Mrs. Clara, who had come to cheer for her daughter, looked like she had swallowed something bitter. For the first time in my life they saw me. Not as the forgotten daughter, not as the unworthy stepchild, but as someone to be reckoned with. And this was only the beginning. The shock of my name being called still lingered in the air as I walked forward to collect my results slip. I could feel the weight of 100 stares pressing down on me, but I kept my head high. Nancy's face was frozen in disbelief, her fingers gripping the edge of her seat. Mrs. Clara sat stiffly beside her, her forced smile failing to hide her displeasure. For years they had dismissed me, cast me aside as if I were invisible. But at that moment I was the only one anyone saw. The competition wasn't over yet. There was one final round, an oral debate in front of a panel of judges. This was where the real challenge began. Nancy had always been the eloquent one, the one who could command a room with her charm and quick thinking. I knew she was confident that this was where she would reclaim her position, where she would humiliate me and prove, once and for all, that I was nothing compared to her. The topic was announced. Does intelligence alone determine success in life? A murmur spread through the audience. It was a loaded question, one that required not just knowledge but depth of thought, experience, and passion. Nancy was called up first. She strode onto the stage with the grace of someone who had spent her entire life in the spotlight. Her argument was polished, filled with statistics, quotes from scholars, and structured logic. She spoke with confidence, with precision, and when she finished, the audience clapped approvingly. She turned to look at me with a smirk as if daring me to do better. Then it was my turn. As I stepped onto the stage, my hands trembled slightly, but I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let fear control me. I had fought too hard to get here. I looked at the judges, then at the audience. I spotted Mrs. Clara's tense expression and Nancy's expectant glare. But I wasn't speaking for them. I was speaking for myself. Intelligence is important, I began, my voice steady. But it is not the only thing that determines success. If it were, then people like me, people who were always told they weren't good enough, weren't smart enough, would never succeed. But here I am. The room fell silent. I pressed forward, my words gaining strength. Hard work, resilience, and belief in oneself matter just as much as intelligence. I was never the smartest in the room. I was never given the opportunities my stepsister had. But I worked. I fought. I refused to be left behind. And that is why I am here today. I saw some of the judges nodding. A few members of the audience murmured in agreement. For the first time I felt something I had never felt before. A sense of power, of control over my own story. When I finished, there was a pause. Then the applause erupted. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was real, genuine applause, the kind that meant something. I glanced over at Nancy. Her smirk was gone. Her face was unreadable. The judges deliberated for what felt like an eternity. Then the head judge stood up and took the microphone. The winner of the National Scholarship Competition is Anita Williams. A gasp rippled through the audience. My heart stopped. I had won. I had actually won. Nancy sat frozen in her seat, her face pale. Mrs. Clara looked as if she had swallowed something bitter. Meanwhile, I stood there, gripping the edges of the podium, feeling a rush of emotions so powerful I could hardly breathe. As I walked off the stage, my certificate in hand, I knew one thing for certain. My life had just changed forever. As I walked off the stage, still gripping the certificate in my hands, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. I had done it. I had proven myself. But as I made my way through the crowd, I could feel the weight of Nancy's glare burning into my back. Mrs. Clara sat stiffly in her chair, her lips pressed into a thin line. The applause was still ringing in my ears, but I knew the battle wasn't over yet. The ride home was silent. Nancy sat with her arms crossed, staring out the window, while Mrs. Clara barely acknowledged my presence. When we arrived, I stepped out of the car expecting them to say something, anything. But they simply walked inside as if nothing had happened. No congratulations. No acknowledgement. Just silence. That night I sat in my room staring at the certificate on my desk. I should have felt victorious, but instead, I felt an emptiness I couldn't explain. I had worked so hard for this moment, but why did it still feel like I had lost something? Maybe deep down I had always hoped that winning would change things. That Mrs. Clara and Nancy would finally see me, finally accept me. But nothing had changed. The next morning I was woken by a knock on my door. When I opened it, Nancy stood there, her expression unreadable. For a moment I thought she was going to congratulate me, but instead she simply said, "Enjoy your little victory while it lasts." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, a sinking feeling settling in my stomach. I had won, but Nancy wasn't going to let me forget who she was. Days passed and preparations for my scholarship trip began. I had meetings with coordinators, travel arrangements to make, and a whirlwind of paperwork to complete. Everywhere I went, people congratulated me, treating me like I was someone important. But at home I was still just Anita, the girl they had always ignored. One evening as I packed my suitcase, Mrs. Clara entered my room for the first time in years. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes scanning the room as if she had never really looked at it before. Then after a long pause she finally spoke. Maybe I underestimated you." I turned to face her, searching her face for any sign of sincerity. But her voice was flat, emotionless. She wasn't proud of me. She was simply acknowledging that I had done something she never thought I was capable of. And somehow that hurt more than if she had said nothing at all. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. There were no words that could fix what had been broken for years. She turned and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The night before my departure, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the person I had become. I had fought for this moment. I had earned it. And no matter what Nancy or Mrs. Clara thought, they couldn't take it away from me. I was no longer the girl they left behind. I was someone who had carved her own path, someone who had proven her worth. As I boarded the plane the next morning, I took one last look at the life I was leaving behind. The pain, the rejection, the loneliness, it was all part of my story. But it didn't define me. I was more than their words, more than their neglect. I was Anita Williams, and my journey was only just beginning. The moment the plane took off, a strange sensation washed over me. It was a mix of excitement, fear, and relief. I was leaving behind everything I had ever known. Every rejection, every cruel word, every moment I had spent doubting myself. As I watched the city disappear beneath the clouds, I realized that for the first time in my life I was truly free. Arriving in a new country was overwhelming. The sights, the sounds, the people, everything was different, unfamiliar. But unlike the fear I had always felt back home, this was a good kind of fear. The kind that pushed me forward rather than held me back. I stepped off the plane with nothing but my suitcase and a heart full of hope. The university was breathtaking. Tall buildings with glass windows that reflected the sky, students from all over the world walking through the campus with a confidence I had never known. And then there was me, Anita Williams, the girl who had once been told she wasn't good enough. I was here now. I had earned my place among them. Classes were intense. The professors challenged us to think in ways I had never imagined. The students were brilliant, competitive, always eager to prove themselves. At first I felt like an outsider, as if any moment someone would realize I didn't belong. But then I remembered how I got here. The late nights spent studying, the sacrifices, the determination. I wasn't going to let fear control me anymore. One evening, after a particularly tough class, I received a message. It was from an unknown number. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. It was Nancy. The message was short, but it sent a chill down my spine. Enjoy it while it lasts. You're still not one of us. I stared at the screen, a wave of emotions crashing over me. After all this time, she still couldn't let me go. She still needed to remind me of my place. But for the first time, her words didn't hurt. They didn't shake me. Because I finally understood something. I wasn't trying to be one of them. I never had been. I was carving my own path, and nothing she said could change that. As the months passed, I found myself growing. I made friends. Real friends who saw me for who I was, not who they expected me to be. I thrived in my studies, pushing myself beyond what I thought was possible. Opportunities came knocking. Internships, projects, recognition. And with every success, I felt the weight of my past grow lighter. One evening, as I sat by the campus fountain, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I received another message. This time it was from an old classmate back home. Nancy dropped out of the competition circuit. She hasn't been the same since you left. Mrs. Clara doesn't talk about you anymore. It's like they're pretending you never existed. I read the message twice, letting the words sink in. A part of me had once craved their acknowledgement, their acceptance. But now I realized I didn't need it. I had found something far greater. I had found myself. That night, as I closed my books and prepared for another day, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had left behind the girl they called unworthy. I had stepped into the life I was meant to live. And no matter what came next, I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of my story.